Particularly as the weather starts to warm up down here in the southern hemisphere, we head into summer, things like hydration are going to become more and more critical for endurance athletes and athletes in general when we're out there training. And really, there's that age-old debate between should I drink to thirst or should I go into an event or into my training with a planned hydration strategy. There's a little bit of a breakdown I want to take you through with a infographic that I reposted on my Instagram the other day that really gives us a good solution to which way we should go and what we should think about when we're trying to combat the effects of heat during our training or racing as well. Hey, welcome back to the channel. Nick here, talking science of endurance and everything in sports science in general. Thanks for subscribing to the channel if you already have, but if you haven't, make sure you do hit that big red button down below, turn notifications on, because otherwise you are missing out on keeping up to date with the best content coming out on the channel when we go live, and you can get your questions answered, should I say, on the channel live, and really get involved in some of the great discussion that's going on within our little community that we're building here. As I sort of mentioned in the intro, today's video is all about hydration strategy. Should we drink to thirst or should we be working off a planned hydration strategy? And it's one of those age-old debates we've had in particularly the endurance industry over a long period of time of what is going to be better. Should I just be drinking to when I'm feeling like I need to, or should I go in and try and achieve some set goals as to when I should be hydrating or how much I should be taking in, the balance of that in terms of fluid, water and electrolyte. I'm not going to go too much in the nitty gritty. Also on what should I be following? Should I be following a drink to thirst or should I be planning my hydration? And really it comes down to understanding fundamentally how our process of sweating occurs. And this is really, relevant for our endurance athletes or athletes in the southern hemisphere. We're about to head into summer. I know here in Melbourne, the forecast for this week is going to be sort of 25 to 27 degrees Celsius by the end of the week. So it's going to start to get pretty warm. We need to be on top of our hydration strategy, but more importantly, we need to understand the process at which we lose fluid. And I've already covered this in a previous video, and actually a couple of videos comparing dry heat versus humidity as well. I'll link particularly that first one above and in the description down below. Understand the process of sweating. We effectively lose fluid from our blood plasma. That's where all the fluid is stored. It goes into the sweat glands. It gets released from the body. That's how we help aid the release of heat away from our system. But when we do so, we lose a fair amount of fluid. And if we're not able to replace it adequately, we start to have some things happen throughout the system. So the first one is obviously a drop in blood plasma volume, which is going to be the critical component. We have less total fluid in the blood. That starts to decrease, things start to happen in terms of blood thickens up, etc. It's a lot more difficult to pump out thicker blood around the system. So we need to make sure we're keeping on top of that intake of fluid to try and replenish that. But outside of our blood plasma, once this effect snowballs and we're not hydrating, if you were to just go into an event or a training session, a long training session, and just not hydrate full stop, that's where you can get into some really serious issues, because then we start to look at, well, what are the effects, or what does the body start to do beyond that? Typically, the body's going to start to slow down its sweat rate once we've lost too much fluid, because it needs to retain some. It needs to make sure there is some fluid within the cells, but particularly within the blood, to keep basic survival, essentially, or keep the body alive. And it's going to start to shut down that sweating process. That leads to increased temperature even further, because we're preventing sweating. We're losing that ability, similar to what you experience in humidity, where it's harder to then cool ourselves down. We're not sweating at all in this circumstance. In humidity, we're still sweating, but it's not evaporating. When we start to stop sweating, or when we stop sweating, should I say, because we've lost enough fluid as it is, the body's just going to shut down survival mode. That's where we can get into some really deep fatigue and really some damaging fatigue as well in terms of heat load stress and the dehydration and the like. So once we get to that point, the body's going to stop sweating. We need to really prevent this. That's one extreme part of it. Obviously, the less extreme end of the spectrum is when we train and we race, we lose a lot of fluid, we start to get a bit thirsty, and that's a pretty obvious one. So how do we combat that desire to then want to drink? Because that can also sometimes lead us down the wrong path in terms of wanting to drink too often, too much. You get a stitch because you've taken on too much fluid, it's sloshing around. It's not a good feeling. Really, this infographic I'm about to put up, I posted on my Instagram. It's something I want to challenge you all to do, is go have a look at my Instagram. We're on the road to about sort of 900 followers at the moment, so I'd really appreciate if you can help us out there. We've got plenty of people in our community here that could jump across and give us a follow. So go check it out, because I post little things like this all the time, and this is where this is coming from. So I'll put it up on the screen here. But in terms of how this all comes together, I've talked through some of those top-end components in terms of losing a bit of fluid and the side effects of it. It really comes down to these two key recommendations from this research study down below. I don't own this infographic. It's from YLM Sports Science. Go check them out on Instagram as well. Some great, simple infographics summarizing some key research articles. Obviously, go and read the research article, but it is a good summary to give you some of those beginning thoughts about what you might do. But you can see down the bottom there, it really compares, based on all these factors we've talked about managing heat, it compares drinking to thirst versus a planned hydration strategy. Really, when we're talking about drinking to thirst, and I might zoom in a little bit closer here, we're looking at events or training sessions, etc., that have exercise intensities that are low to moderate in nature, less than 60 minutes and cool to warm environments. Why is that typically the case? That's going to be the case because we're not typically in those circumstances using those three variables, losing massive amounts of fluid. You go to a cool or even a slightly warm environment, you're not going to lose as much as a hot environment, for example. But then also less than 60 minutes, you're not going to have enough time to lose enough fluid. We say this a lot when I do lab testing with athletes. You might do a half an hour test or a 20-minute worth test. Dehydration or heat load fatigue isn't going to be a number one contributor to fatigue. It's more likely to be things like lactic acid accumulation or muscular endurance. If you're an athlete who only does 5-6 minute duration events like a 1500 or 3,000 on the track, things like that. If you're an athlete who does that majorly and you then asked to run for 20-30 minutes continuously, it might be a stretch, particularly at high intensity. So it's the type of thing that we see other areas of fatigue in instances where the duration is less than 60 minutes. Flicking across to my other recommendation here, or the other one from this infographic, planned hydration strategies therefore work better when the exercise intensity goes up. So we're going from moderate to high intensity. We're now talking 60 minutes and above, and the climate is obviously changing in terms of a little bit warmer. So warm to hot conditions rather than that cool to warm. Now, this is a very simple breakdown. It may not sit well with a lot of athletes just looking at this at face value, because we know, particularly triathletes, you might race in really warm conditions and humid conditions like Kona or throughout Southeast Asia. These types of climates aren't going to necessarily go either way. We're going maybe not at moderate intensity, but for the most part, I would say majority of people are racing even half Ironman, particularly half Ironman distance, probably even up to Ironman if you're a top end age grouper. You're going to be racing at a moderate intensity rather than a low. I define a moderate intensity more like your zone 2, sort of leaning zone 3 in a 5-zone system. So your endurance type stuff and maybe a bit of tempo is sort of your moderate intensity. Anything high intensity would be getting close to threshold and above. Anything low intensity would typically be pretty close to active recovery. So maybe some ultra distance races, things like Ultraman. If you're going out and doing some ultra distance running, where you are where you're up and down trails, where you are generally at a lower intensity, where you're sort of seeing bottom zone 2 heading sort of active recovery type intensity, but you're having to sustain that for a long period of time. It's the type of thing that might be a little bit different circumstance for yourself. But for the most part, most people racing in some capacity are going to be working at a moderate intensity if it's a long distance event, or if it's a shorter distance event, it's going to be high intensity. And that's where a planned hydration strategy is better, because obviously in that circumstance, even with the intensity factor, don't worry about heat so far, the intensity factor of the event in terms of moderate to high, because you're working harder, you're producing more internal heat as a result of aerobic processes. Heat is a key byproduct of the aerobic glycolysis system. We break down glycogen carbohydrates with our oxygen usage coming in through the system. That's where we get a bit more internal heat. You add that with the temperature then, and we're producing a large amount of heat, so we have to sweat a lot. And a planned hydration strategy would help keep you ahead of the game, if that makes sense, in terms of the getting fluid back into the body to keep you up and running. Whereas in less than 60 minutes, like I said, there's just not enough time. Even if it was an exceptionally hot day, maybe you might think about just like, all right, halfway through my event, if you're doing a 10K run, for example, halfway through, I'm just going to take 1 or 2 cups of water to keep my mouth from going too dry. We're not really concerned because it's not long enough to allow you to sweat too much out. In an hour, yes, you might lose a lot of fluid, but it's not like you're going to be losing 2-3 kilos worth of body weight in fluid. Whereas longer than an hour, you go up to 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Marathon runners, for example, by the end of it, in very hot conditions, planned hydration strategy throughout might be a little bit better to just combat it, purely from the fact that you're going to be losing potentially a larger amount of fluid and body weight overall. So there's just some thoughts and a really interesting infographic that I wanted to show you that I did post throughout the week. What are your thoughts on hydration down below? What have you used a drink to thirst or a planned hydration strategy? And what results did you have with either of those, if you've tested either, or what do you prefer to use? Always can hear your thoughts down in the comments down below. As I said, this infographic I put up during the week on my Instagram. I challenge you all to go over and check it out. It is a little bit of self-promotion here, but it's a space for me to post these little quick bites of information and some of the topics we're about to talk about. It also keeps you up to date by checking out my Instagram of when we are going live, when videos are going up, and all of the rest. So go check that one out. Go check out the infographic and have a look at YLM, because they've got some really great stuff on there as well. As always, please consider subscribing to the channel. Share it with someone that you think might get something out of this video or needs to work on their hydration strategy. This could be a really good starting point for them. So go share it with them. But otherwise, that is it for today, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.